Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt down in the Catacombs. I didn't really even intend to shoot a show today, but I came across a story that I just find so rattling that I thought I would just step into the catacombs down here, right, Rob?
Yeah.
You were good enough to accommodate me here. I don't know. I'm beyond irate because it doesn't do any good to be irate anymore. But I'm talking about this new transgender, what do you call it? Nonsense. Sort of totalitarian transgender legalism that's going on all around us now. We see it everywhere. And I was reminded as I read the story that now, and this comes to us from Charisma News, Michael Brown talking about the fact that in New York City and in Washington State, the transgender laws have completely gone off the rails. Now, there is a $250,000 fine in New York City if you're found to be in violation of the new transgender laws. Now, that can mean any number of things according to the story. So let's say you're in the gym, you're working out, and you go into the shower, and what looks like a woman comes in, Rob, and wants to take a shower right there in the stall next to you. If you question this, if you complain about this, you can be found in violation and be charged $250,000 fine leveled against you in New York City. And Washington State has the same laws. Are you aware of this?
It's
And it
awesome.
yeah, it's nice. It gets weirder and frightening, more frightening if you happen to be in a school, a restaurant, whatever. A little 10-year-old girl goes to the bathroom into the room designated for ladies, and some bearded 250-pound man goes in after her. Same thing. You can't question him. You can't ask the management to do something about it. You can't even ask him to produce credentials proving that he's been diagnosed with transgenderism, whatever that even means. And so, Rob, what happened is I began to think there's something else is afoot here. This really isn't about transgender rights. What this is about is the war on gender. And I think the problem is we have too many people who are taking the argument seriously, taking this as though it's a civil rights issue. It's not, ladies and gentlemen. I think that the faster, the sooner that we recognize this for what it is. This is a war against gender. This is a war against everything as God created it. What we're dealing with right now on the level of the street is the war between Christ and Antichrist, between the kingship of Christ and the kingship of Satan. And I know how that sounds, Rob. We know how that sounds. That's church lady stuff. You sound a little nutty, a little paranoid, a little goofy when you talk that way. But I can't come up with another reason for why they would be doing this. You can't have bathrooms designated for women and men because that somehow violates somebody's rights somewhere. This is insane. This is the recipe for complete insanity. They're doing it to the military. They already have done it. They're demoralizing the military through the same process, women and men mixed up. One thing they haven't tried yet is in the prison system. I'd be curious to see how that liberal hogwash works if they decide to put the ladies and the men together in state pens. I wonder how well that would work. I think the fact that we all know it wouldn't gives some indication of how this is bunk according to everyone. So there's another ideologically driven agenda here. It has to do with the war on gender. And this brought me back a little bit. Now I'm old enough where I can reflect on the past, and I remember vintage traditionalism. I remember my own father, for example. Now I have 7 sisters. My father had 7 daughters. And I remember back in the day, it was utterly forbidden in my Catholic household for my sisters to wear pants. You might remember some of this, Rob. And this back then, back in the early days of the traditional movement, this was not a controversial thing. Everyone was against women wearing pants. Now, why is this? The mistaken thing was, many people thought it had to do with modesty. It didn't have to do with modesty first and foremost, because you can baggy up a pant on a woman, pair of pants, and it's really not a question of modesty anymore. So what the early traditionalists were really, really angry about and upset about and fighting against was the same thing we're dealing with right now, like Bruce Jenner, transgenderism, all these things. The early traditionalists understood there was a war against everything that God had created, whether it's the child, the baby in the womb, natural life and death. So we're talking about abortion, we're talking about euthanasia, the pattern that God had set for life, whether we're talking about the roles of women and men, the family, mother as heart, man as head of the home. All of these things is what it meant to be a traditionalist. Unfortunately, It's come down to, I think, the mistaken idea that it's just about Latin masses, and that's really all it was. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, in the old days, they were not just talking about Latin masses. They were talking about a full-scale, all-out frontal assault against the natural order as God created it at every level. So for a traditionalist to be opposed, again, to the idea of cross-dressing, that's what they were opposed to. That's what they were fighting against. Women dressing like men. Because they understood from history, we even see this in Augustine, we see this in Thomas, we see this in the Summa, this whole idea of transgenderism recognized or manifesting itself through this idea of cross-dressing. Waging war on what is sexually appropriate. And I just think that we need to kind of maybe put a shout out to the old pioneers of the traditional movement. They have been so vindicated on so many issues. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying if your wife wears a pair of, today in 2016 now, wears a pair of trousers to go gardening or ride a horse, that's a mortal sin. Come on, let's get beyond that. Let's talk about the philosophy that was at stake and what was motivating traditionalists. They saw this war against the church, war against the mass, war against the family, war against the unborn, and they were fighting against it. And so now with 2020, we can look back. You got little kids. This little girl that goes into the bathroom and some man wants to go in behind her because now he thinks he's a woman, and we're supposed to forget all about the rights of the little girl. I mean, this is the chaos. This is what they meant. When you throw Christ out, when you break the order, the natural order of the world and of the church as God ordained it, you're going to end up with chaos like we now have. And I think it's very important to recognize what it means to be a tradition-minded Catholic. What you're talking about is all of these things, not just the Latin Mass. That's just another element, another aspect of it. How we worship was also under attack. But it's very important to realize the family, the unborn, children, innocents, everything was under attack, has been for a long time. And if you think that somehow you can avoid all of this, I've got a story here from a local school called Nova Classical Academy. And this isn't a traditional Catholic school, but it's doing something that a lot of traditional Catholics do, is set up a small school to try to avoid the nonsense and the insanity in the public school system. Well, they're under fire right now because a set of parents decided that their child is transgender. And so they're requiring Nova Academy to have special classes and special poetry readings, and the child is going to dress in the opposite gender's appropriate dress. Parents are outraged. But you can see it's coming closer and closer to all of us. So don't pretend like you can somehow sit this one out, because they don't want anyone. When I say they, I'm talking about the powers that be in the world and media and government and so forth. They don't want anyone to sort of identify with these classic understandings as God ordained these things, whether it's family or gender. And so we're going to see much more of this, whether it's in your small school. This school got this Nova Academy, apologized and complied, and they're going along with it, because what else can they do? We can't sit this out. And I'll make a little prediction right here, Rob. When it comes to this issue of transgenderism affecting, public restrooms, it's not going to work. So in a few years, we're going to see the disappearance of male and female bathrooms. You're going to lose the little skirt image and the little stickman pantsuit. That's going to go away, and we're going to have men and women going into the same room. They'll probably stall it off a little bit for the individual and so forth. But again, even down to using facilities, to relieving ourselves, is going to change. That's how revolutionary this is, how fundamental this is. And I think it's very, very important that we realize time is running out, time is short. This is what their agenda is right now. And for us to pretend that everything that motivates us is merely liturgical, is just the Latin Mass, and to overlook everything else that's happening. I know we're running short on time, but it reminds me of the situation with the gun control thing. We had Obama come out the other night and tell us how he's going to put more ATF troops out there, and they're going to have more laws and all of this on the issue of guns. All of us are tired of the shootings, the mass shootings and so forth. Something has to be done, I get it. But his solution is more big government. So it reminds me, it's reminiscent of that. Don't get hung up just on the idea of, I want to keep my guns, dang it, I'm a Second Amendment guy. Don't miss the bigger picture. The bigger picture here is they want to make sure that your security, even when you're in bed at night, is fully and wholly dependent on the federal government. It's all about the nanny state. So you see it sort of at every level, whether it's transgenderism or abortion or sex education, or right down to the right to protect yourself and your family. They're at war with a way of life and with an ideology. And I think if we begin to understand this, don't get sucked into the little arguments. You can have your guns for hunting and for a little of that and so forth, but the government needs to teach you how to protect yourself. The government's going to protect, not teach you how to protect yourself. The government will protect you. That's the sort of argument that we need to have. And that's kind of why down here in the underground, we get together as often as we can. We have these conversations. We need to wake up. There really, truly is a battle between good and evil going on. Don't make it something that it's not. Don't make it smaller than it is. It's fundamental, it's large, it's overreaching, it's global, it's universal. And what we need to do is get over the neo-Catholic versus traditional Catholic and all these small, petty, little picayune things. Recognize the enemy for who and what it is. It's demonic, it's the devil. And agree to come together, do whatever we possibly can with the help of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and His Blessed Mother and all the saints to fight against the real enemy and to understand we're not going to be able to sit this out. We're not going to be able to beat this through any other means. Thank you very much for listening to my rant tonight. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you next week.